Hello VR gamers. Today we're talking about Propagation Paradise Hotel. This is a zombie horror survival game from Wanna Dev Studios, the people behind the original Propagation VR, which came out, whoa, that's a long time ago. So this is what they've been up to since, and they've come a long way from standing still while zombies run at you. Now we can actually move. Oh, and there's tools and scavenging and stealth. Paradise Hotel is definitely a huge upgrade from the original Propagation VR. It's more of a game than just a novelty. Though if you leave this review with anything, it's that this game is very short, a few hours at the most, but it is a satisfying short game, though you won't get as much entertainment value for your money as you might with other games, even VR single-player games. The premise is the usual early zombie apocalypse sort of thing. You're stuck in the kitchen with your buddy Owen, and your sister is alive on one of the upper floors. Oh, and the military is on their way to rescue you on the roof. So, you need to go back up through the hotel, get to your sister, and make it to the roof to get picked up. Though what makes this game different from most zombie games is that the zombies don't stay down. Every corpse you run across is a potential threat, because unless their head is completely destroyed, they'll get back up even after you put them down. Areas that you previously entered aren't safe, because what was once just a dead body might get up and try to eat you. We'll get into that more in a bit here, but first let's talk about the presentation. For a Quest 2 game, this looks really good. The blockiness and low-res textures and objects that you see in a lot of VR games, standalone ones especially, isn't really obvious until you look for it. Though that could also be because most of the game is dark, like really dark. It's a horror game, and so that's definitely par for the course, and it means you'll always want to use your flashlight, though you also need to be careful not to run out of flashlight batteries, though it also definitely helps smooth out some of the usual rougher graphical edges that are more obvious in well-lit rooms. Still, for a game running on the Quest, this looks good, and considering the sheer amount of gore in some of the areas, you might not actually want it to look better. Though where the game really shines is the sound, and more specifically the lack of it. The developers showed a lot of wise restraint here. There's not a lot going on for long stretches. And those moments where the tension is building and you're looking around every corner or at every corpse and wondering where the next threat is going to come from is aided a lot by the sound design. There's this creepy, hollow noise that constantly plays. It's like being in a haunted graveyard, which you kind of are, and all you hear are the footsteps as you walk around. Then, when a zombie wakes up and starts to growl, it fills the silence. The whole effect is very foreboding. Propagation Paradise Hotel saves the music tracks for the action-packed moments in between sneaking, so when you get attacked, there's some serviceable action tracks. These aren't phenomenal, but really amp up the surprise and panic when the long quiet is broken by combat. Propagation Paradise Hotel uses sound well to make it a scarier game and accentuate the pacing of tension building and sudden spurts of action. There's also the voice acting, which is okay.
Well, it only took the end of the world for me to finally start a diet.
At least for the English version, there's a few strange intonations on words.
Only static. There has to be other survivors somewhere.
But overall, there's very little emotion or weight behind the voice acting.
I was just on my way to try to repair them.
Luckily, there isn't too much of it, but overall it sounds like most people aren't too bothered by the zombie apocalypse, and it's a little jarring, though that's not always the case.
Ashley, I knew she was alive. I knew it.
The protagonist's voice is pretty good, and she does genuinely sound worried, scared, or triumphant at times. Before we get to the gameplay, let's also talk about the VR controls. They're pretty standard and nothing absolutely phenomenal or terrible, but there is one quirk. Unless you've broken your hand several times and can't turn your wrist anymore, or you've been typing on a keyboard for so long that the carpal tunnel has forced your hand into a constant 45-degree angle, you'll have to turn your wrist awkwardly to aim down weapon sights. Luckily, you can fix this by changing the vertical controller orientation down or up as you please. -10 worked well for me, but you might be more comfortable at a different setting. There's also no collision between your hands and the environment. The various keys, tools, switches, and physical objects you interact with in the game world actually felt really good and responsive though. Your hand won't just slip right off of them, and if you turn your hand, the object will turn to like you'd expect it would. So there was never this awkward moment of flailing around while trying to flip a switch. This is easier said than done, and overall the controls were good and tight for interaction to aiming. Like we talked about before, a lot of the scariness in this game comes from the dead things not staying dead. Early on, you won't be getting much ammo either, and so you'll have to scavenge a lot for bullets, healing antiseptic, and batteries for your flashlight. Even light can be a scarce resource, so you are encouraged to not always light up an area, which definitely adds to the spooky factor. The first half of the game relies on stealth a lot to conserve your resources. The zombies don't stay down, they hit hard, and take a lot of shots to put down, so you'll be well off sneaking around from room to room. This section of the game plays into its strengths a lot. You feel vulnerable, and there's no way to clear an area and completely feel safe. Even if you've already been somewhere before, you can't just run around like you own the place. The zombies own the place, and you're just passing through to try to get higher in the hotel and escape. It works really well, and the potential of this game really shines through until you get the shotgun. The shotgun can turn a zombie's head into mist, and they won't get back up again. This is really awesome at first, but as a consequence, the game becomes more linear. You don't need to retread areas as much, and when you do, there won't be any of the undead there to greet you, so a lot of the tension of sneaking and scavenging as efficiently as possible dissipates. Instead, it becomes very combat-focused, and the combat itself isn't the greatest part of this game. It ends up being a combination of reloading really quickly and keeping the zombies away, which you can by hitting them in the face when they try to eat you. So you get into this loop of shooting and then swinging to chain stun whatever zombie you're facing. Oh, and in this part of the game, you'll be getting mountains of ammo all of a sudden, where once you had to be careful and look closely to find some, you'll just be coming across piles of it out in the open. The zombies do get harder to compensate for your new power, but you can't sneak around them, so you'll have to blast your way through. So this game just ends up becoming a subpar zombie action game towards the end. Oh, and there's puzzles thrown in there sometimes. They really just break up the tension and don't really serve much of a purpose. I'm not a fan of these puzzles. They felt silly. Turning some knobs to activate a pump seems reasonable to give you a slightly different thing to do for a little while and break up the sneaking in combat. Trying to find what number is on a jersey to find out what a door code is felt very gamey in a bad way. Speaking of gamey, there's even a final boss, but now we're getting into spoiler territory, so if you don't want to know what happens, go here. Alright, so the story is straightforward. Once you and Owen go to the lobby, Owen gets eaten by a huge monster. You try to get up the stairs, but they're blocked, and you have to go to the hotel owner's apartment to get a key to use the service entrance. That turns out to also be blocked, but you run into Edgar after being chased by the big monster. With him, you turn on the elevators, but then he gets eaten too. You destroy the big monster and go up the elevator. You finally talk to your sister in the elevator, and it gets stuck. Some sort of chainsaw man comes for your sister, and you're stuck in an elevator as the game fades out. It's really disappointing to not even get a complete story out of the game. With just an extra couple hours of gameplay, there could have been a satisfying ending. Instead, it just sort of peters out at the end for no apparent reason. A sequel is teased, but if there is one, it should definitely be longer. Propagation Paradise Hotel has some neat ideas, but never fully commits to any of them, and so it just becomes all about the shooting at the end. If they'd leaned more into the horror aspect, then there would have been a great zombie horror game here. As it is now, it's just too short and gives up on what makes it unique halfway through, so there's only really a couple hours of fantastic gameplay here that you can't find done better somewhere else. Overall, I really don't regret my time with this game. It was a lot of fun, and I'm still kept wishing that I had more of it, which is also a good sign, even though it sort of leaned away from what made it so good at the end. Anyway, that's all for this review. Thanks for watching, good luck and have fun out there.